Togo. That's what we'll be starting here today. And we'll start right off with the last part of that, is what exactly is Togo. Now Togo, if you're not quite sure, Togo, it's a country about the size of Rhode Island. Okay, right about there. So a very, very small country, but still very, very ethnically diverse and very religiously diverse and part and parcel of West Africa. Do you want to jump in? So there we go. Togo's history, it has been colonized at one point or another. It is a colonial nation carved out of the interests of colonialism. That's not a natural country by any stretch of the imagination. It started off a colony of the Germans. The Germans lost it in World War I. It then had to be decided between the French and the English. The League of Nations determined it would go to France. It did. A lot of people in Togo petitioned to go under the English, because God knows no one wants to go under the French, and they lost that argument at the League of Nations, so it became a French nation until 1960.
And that was the first domino to fall in World War I. Most people don't realize that, but that was the first Allied victory in World War I. It was a radio station.
It was also the first casualties of World War I, as an English officer was shot. First casualties of World War I.
In Togo, land of Vodu, what is your name, by the way?
Jose.
Yeah, Jose made a comment when he came in. He says, you know, this is important, people don't know. It's as if materialism has replaced this. Anywhere we go in the world, we know that people of African descent tend to be, on average, in general, on the lowest socioeconomic echelons of any society. I was in Brazil once, and they said, oh, we don't have those problems like you do in the United States. It's two very dark brothers carried my bags from the airport, right? But more than that, more than just being a racialized thing, I would argue, and I don't think many people can dispute the fact that no religion in the history of the world has been as misunderstood or as maligned as voodoo. The very word itself brings up pictures of diabolic bloodlust and pins and needles. And the truth is that this is probably not only the oldest religion in the world, but this is really a root to other religions, including Abrahamic religions. A lot of this stuff, and new research is starting to show, that ended up in the Middle East, came out of sub-Saharan black Africa. Now that doesn't mean that voodoo is the equivalent of all other animistic things as a whole. But very much maligned and misunderstood. But however, it is growing. It's not growing as much as Islam and Christianity, obviously, but if you were to add up all the voodoo and include the Orisha spectrums from Nigeria, which of course brings you to Cuba, brings you to Brazil, brings you to Haiti, you're probably looking at around 100 million followers, although you'll never hear voodoo discussed as a world religion or Orisha, although people are starting to argue just that, and it probably should be as well.
Now, a big thing with voodoo is a lot of people posit it as some like primordial religion of the African people. It goes back 20,000 years. No, that is actually not true. Voodoo is actually more recent than you think, and voodoo largely helps people respond to a lot of the challenges of the day. Today is no different than it was even a couple hundred years ago. What's going on in South Togo today? And this is the first part of our research here. In the community we worked with, which is on the coast of southern Togo, there's immense change happening all around them. The first giant change, this is a photo actually taken from the village looking west.
Yes.
There's the local village of Katanga next door. In the distance, what you are seeing being constructed is the largest deep water port on the entire western edge of the continent of Africa.
Maybe all of Africa, as far, not in size, but as far as what they're taking. Because you remember, you have Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger to the north that are landlocked. Everything comes through this port. This port is also an example, a metaphor, a nutshell summary of the way exploitation works. While we were there, we had Spanish trawlers stripping away the earths to make the port deeper for things like this. You had Dutch people who were doing the cranes, all this stuff outsourced. This is a tax-free port as a whole. On the political end of this, the reason, even though we talk about voodoo, that we had to start our book out here is the president, the current president's brother, pretty much runs this like a kleptocracy, almost like mafia style. So a lot of this money isn't traced. They've forgiven structural adjustment loans. This isn't really the point of our talk here. But yeah, so this is a peri-urban village. You walk through, it's like camping out up north, right? You'll see pictures of the village and stuff like that. But right here you see these large wharfs and huge things going on. Recently you've seen escalation in pirating, especially in Nigeria. There's actually more pirate attacks in Nigeria than is going on in Somalia now. So you see a lot of people that come to Togo because Togo has been a dictatorship for so long. They actually have a very strong military, a very strong navy. I don't want to get into the unethical things that they've done to myself, him a little bit as well. But this area is booming, and we hope to show you more of that throughout this. So this is the, I'll let Dr. Vannier take off here, but we call this Bedala. We use a pseudonym. This Eve actually means herdsman or plant tree, but this is a picture of the village where, ironically, Dr. Monteluz is here. You want to talk to discuss voodoo. When I was at University of Michigan, the first time I visited this village and visited Africa, I actually met Dr. Montelus. We didn't know each other. He was at Wayne State, and little did I know that I would end up doing my dissertation and everything later on his behalf, but I know he's familiar, so I want to welcome him as well. Go ahead, Christian, you want to talk about some demographics?
The first time I went to Africa, I went with Dr. Montelus, so there you go. Anyway, so you turn that camera around to the east, and what you see here is the actual community. It's about 14 to 1,600 individuals. That varies widely depending on how fishing and the economy is going. It goes south, people move out. It goes up, people move in. But it's all kin-based and related. They're all majority ethnic Ewe, that is a small ethnic group populating the southeast of Ghana, the south of Togo, that speak the Bay language, which is related directly to the Adjunct of Benin. In the community of Badala, it's majority fishermen, and we would ask around about 90% fishermen, according to ethnographic survey. But more and more, there's something else happening in these communities. Right here in the back of the communities, you see these brand new factories have just been built. Lebanese and something else.
Now here you have a Lebanese pharmaceutical company. Yeah. Over here you have a Korean-owned soap and cosmetic company. Wow. The important thing I want you to see is, and this is where people relieve themselves, but outside of here where this is, they've also built the West African gas pipeline, which runs all the way from Nigeria into Ivory Coast. Our wonderful American oil companies have done that. When they did that, the people grew food here in this village. Carrots, a diversity of things. Carrots, hot peppers, tons of different yams and tubers. They were forced to give up their land. They were giving supposedly a good amount of money for it, but they weren't allowed. They had no agency in it at all. Meanwhile, you have this encroaching sea because of global warming that will wipe this village out. This village, which has been here since the late 1880s, will be gone probably by 2050. So on the one hand, you have political and economic pressures from the north. On the other hand, you have environmental pressure. So I don't mean to be, oh, these poor voodoo people are going to be squeezed out of existence. This religion will travel and it will go elsewhere like it always has. But nonetheless, it is a very sad state of affairs there as well.
The last thing, of course, is tourism, where it is a beachside village. They are fishermen, and they launch from the beach. Tourism has moved in, where hotels have sprung up along the beach, and this has brought foreign-owned hotels. There's a Spanish hotelier, which was the greatest guy on earth.
Who passed away.
Next door to a French hotelier, next door to, I think, an American hotelier.
Robinson Place, originally English, yes.
British, there you go.
White-owned stuff, white and also Chinese and a little bit of Indian, but very little of this stuff is black-owned. Let me just say that, or for that matter, African-owned. And this is under development. This is Walter Rodney at his key, and I don't know if you get a chance to read a book, to plug another book other than our own, James Ferguson's Jobless City, which To Give a Man is a concept of the Jobless City based on To Give a Man a Fish, is talking about it all over Africa, but not just Africa, all over the quote-unquote third world. There's no jobs, and people flock from rural areas to the city, so people have to get very creative in the ways in which they make money. One of those creative things has been voodoo and ritual. We separate it so much with our Western mentality that we don't realize that the very rituals and animal sacrifices that people do have to do with getting a visa to come to America. They have to do with getting a job. So we separate the political economic from the spiritual sphere, and that's a very dangerous thing to do in Africa, and many people do it. And if you do that, you miss out on the big picture. Things are embedded and integrated here in a way. And yes, tourism, you can see this is idyllic, only 56 kilometers of coastline in Togo, but it is absolutely beautiful place.
But really what the main thing we were doing here in this community is regionally recognized to house the most powerful shrine of Goro Voodoo, kept by a very powerful shrine.
Probably the most powerful one in all of Togo.
Yeah.
There is stronger ones in Ghana, in the Volta region. The man who, quote-unquote, invented voodoo, and we'll get into how this happens. So, and I think we should take time before we go through this to distinguish a little bit between. So there's voodoo, all right, and then there is Goro Voodoo. The voodoo that Dr. Montelus is familiar with in Haiti is V-O-D-O-U. A lot of that is Beninois and Togolese based, although the Congolese aspect has been underestimated, as you've written about. Goro Voodoo that we're talking about here is actually a new form of voodoo. So they've taken northern gods, when slaves, domestic slaves, were brought south, a lot of them married into Ave Patriline's. A lot of women married into these tribes. So technically, if you were to do DNA analysis of people in my village, they're going to have some Kabye, some Moshi, some Fulani, some northern roots in it. Because they enslaved those folks from the north, they made a lot of money off them. There's this guilt, this notion that debt stays. So they've taken these northern gods that were at one time independent gods, and they've assembled them into what we call a pre-existing voodoo filter or pre-existing voodoo matrix. So people are like, is it voodoo, is it? Some people in Benin would say, this is tron, meaning to turn. This isn't the same voodoo. But they've taken these gods from the north, and they've co-opted them in a way. So when folks go into trance, they'll start speaking Moshi. languages they don't know from the north because that slave spirit is in their blood. It is powerful, powerful stuff. Not to mention the power that they have when they're in trance as a whole. So the main gods here, running from Koundé being the father to Ablewa, at one time either in Burkina Faso, northern Ghana, northern Togo, Niger, or Mali were separate gods. When these people were enslaved domestically at the end of slavery, they died violent deaths, what they call vumeku, which means to die in blood. Afemeku means you see death coming. We all want to die peacefully in our sleep. Because these slaves died violent deaths, they're very dangerous. And if you don't appease them and you don't reconcile these differences, they can haunt and bring bad luck to your life. We will go as far in the book to be fully mimetic. Maybe we should have shrines. Maybe we should just have a few Africans looking over, Hart Plaza at Canada. Maybe we should have a place where people can go and make offerings to these slave spirits, because it's about going full circle as a whole. Christian. Yeah, so kinship is really important. This is a patrilineal society, although in some ways it can be matrifocal. The Akan next door are matrilineal. The phone next door are patrilineal as a whole. So lineage is very important. This guy named after me, Eric Evie, he's not my biological one, but he does get his school fees because he's named after me, right? And I'm making a joke. But this Kofa is this guy's son. He has 4 or 5 different wives. That's Bokono Sofo Bisi. He was raised Catholic, interestingly, born in 1948. We could write a whole book just about this guy. This guy can do more for sickle cell anemia than anybody I've seen in the world. I've had African Americans on their deathbeds who have been saved not once, not twice, and I've written about it 5 to 10 times, as have other professors. They can cure crack and heroin addiction at about 70 to 80%. We're doing it at about 2 or 3% on a good day here. That being said, people die from basic diarrhea. I'm not trying to say that this indigenous medicine is superior. I'm saying that we can learn a lot from it. And there's a lot of credit given to Ayurvedic medicine in India, and a lot more credit given to Chinese traditional medicine. Well, why not Africa? Folks have been harvesting plants there for longer than anywhere in the world, and obviously race has something to say about that as a whole. So our big idea, and Christian works on NGOs and does stuff, and it involves legal things, is to try to get some patents on some of these things. A lot of people say, don't share it, don't share it. But you have the Chinese government's been twice in the last year going and visiting, stealing some of these plant medicines, getting patents on it and selling them. They're being exploited in a very big way. One patent on that sickle cell anemia could ensure that every single person in this village could go to college for the rest of their lives. Otherwise, Christian and I, on our adjunct salaries, are breaking off $100 every 2 weeks here, $100 there. It helps a little bit, but it isn't sustainable. But Bokono Sofo Bisi is not only a strong diviner, but he's an incredible medicine man. And if you look at the books, we've had the ability to look at them. Some of them are this thick. Unfortunately, no one's carrying on this scientific knowledge in the village, which is part of the reason he shared so much of this with us. He's concerned about that.
So we can dive right in here to what exactly we were doing. Now, we worked out of this shrine directly with him and his family. They are the shrine keepers. They keep the shrine, they house the shrine, they take care of the spirits that are located within the shrine. So we took this and we really went in there with a key theoretical orientation from our text, which is ritual economy. Basically, this is a deep understanding of the relationship between religion and economics. Don't think like formal economics, like the stock market, which is probably down another damn 1,000 points today. But think more like economic relationships of reciprocity, of redistribution. Does that make sense? Or you got to think in kind of different terms here. Where some key assumptions of this: religious values and beliefs structure the economy, but does not determine them. Be careful of that. We can understand religious practice through a lens of materiality and rationality. Sacred goods can be understood as commodities. Some of this is our Western thinking tries to resist this type of thinking. But in this shrine, it is not that way. Your relationship with the spirits can be quite economical. I will help you and you will help me, spirit. And the spirit will look at you. I will help you and you will help me. It'll be a system of very rational reciprocity where all of us, spirits included, do what we need done. Achieve our aspirations, our desires, our needs, etc., etc. And finally, the key crux of our book is these long-term economic strategies that people engage in. Success for your children, personal, whatever it happens to be, you can understand through the immediate ritual life of people. Why are people spending so much money on gifts to the spirits, on sacrifice to the spirits? Because it is practical and it is rational in order to achieve their long-term economic goals. Does that make sense? And you got to kind of break free of your dualistic, like you said, thinking between like West and Africana, which we have a slide on.
But to reinvigorate that post-structural binary opposition, it's really he or she who dies with the most tends to win. Prestige is constructed on accumulation. We know about this from Harvey, and we understand capitalism. That doesn't mean that people who have a lot of money can't give it away and reciprocate it. But prestige is not constructed on how much you have in your bank account or what kind of car you drive. It's on how much you give away. And if you're not reciprocating and you're not giving it away, now this is an anti-capitalistic ethic at its very root. And then we got to be careful with the structuralism as a whole. But priests who are misers, priests who take money from people that can't afford to do things, they don't tend to last very long. That doesn't mean that there's not some unethical Bokonosophos and voodoo priests. We know they're in all religions, right? But as a whole, this ethic of reciprocity percolates into the African way in a way that's really difficult for us in the West to understand.
So how exactly did we do it? Obviously it's always the key methods of anthropology, participant observation, and interviewing. Interviewing, we did things quite a bit differently. We'd use photo voice to understand like markets and rationality with market women. We are not, as foreigner men, we are not allowed to go to markets with women. Boy, they made that very clear. Can I go with you guys? No, because people would take one look at me and that price would go up about 10 times. No way are you going with us. So they generously agreed to take photos and take cameras with them. They took video too, which was very fun. But also during ceremonies, we can videotape all the ritual and ceremonies we want. We don't understand what they are looking at because we are not them. So what we would do is work closely, generally with young assistant priests who are very eager to do it, would take the camera and they would do the filming for us. Once they filmed it, we could then go through the footage with them very carefully to interview and understand, okay, why did you film this? What does this mean? What are you looking at? And it generated some very interesting data, especially with a cow sacrifice, which I believe we have on
Sure.
here. I was terrified. That guy was so in there on the jugglers. I thought he was going to get blood all over the camera. He was really, and finally I got a chance to interview him. I'm like, wow, you didn't, I'm backing up to get the whole picture. That's how I see things. He was in there about as focused on blood and gore as you could possibly be. And I thought, why is that? And he got very excited. I was like, you got to understand, that's the moment. When the blood comes out, when the blood flows on the spirits, this is the moment of union. Do you understand? And it wasn't until I could see the footage and how he did it, did I truly get that. And then how deep and involved he was. He didn't care about the whole picture. He didn't care about the other people that my Western eyes are looking at. No, it was the blood and the spirits. That was the main focus. That's what it is. So it's very interesting what you can come up with here. And of course, participant observation. You are expected to participate in this religious system. The first time I sat down there to do it, I looked right at the guy and said, but I'm Catholic. He looked right back and said, so am I. And I guess I was going to lead prayers that day. So I did. You don't have a choice.
A little side note, when Christian was in the sacred bush and he didn't have to get cut, but he didn't have to bathe with traditional atike and medicine and stuff like that. And you're supposed to grab it and put it over your head, and he puts both of his feet and jumps right into it, and we still laugh about it to this day.
Yeah, you're supposed to wash it kind of like a Muslim does with your wrist, and I didn't understand what was being asked, so I just jumped.
Which is a whole other thing here, right? This Islamic element. They do feet washings and hand washings on Fridays. You see tons of words that are Arabic. At the end of a voodoo ceremony, if you see our film, he's going through the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not. And people, and Dr. Montelus taught me this, says, oh, well, it's syncretism. Syncretism coming from Greek, synkrasis means to mix. There's no mixing going on here. It's called inclusivity. It's called being open-minded. They're not knocking on your door saying there's only one God and Muhammad's his prophet. You worship Jesus, you go to hell. But that doesn't mean that they don't recognize him. Includes many of them will tell you that Jesus was a voodoo himself. Before we get a question on the photo voice really quickly, I got this idea from Christian. I ended up publishing something on it. So not only did we give them cameras, but we gave them different video cameras and stuff and sent different women out, not just to market, but to other places. Then the idea was for them to come back with still shots, and then they were to put the caption, their own caption, and put their own title on it. And then we took and we minimized and went through it. And this comes out of an idea from Wang and others who have done this in China. It's a way to try to give some agency. In some ways it worked, in some ways it didn't. On the one hand, we know about as much about voodoo as a 7 or 8 year old kid in some ways, especially with the linguistic barriers. But on another hand, we've been trained in anthropology so we can frame it in ways that they can as well. So part of me feels like we're never going to get this stuff, and another part of me is I hope that we're doing justice to it.
Okay, so go to the next one. I think we jump right in. Oh, here, you want to take this?
Yeah, so Goro, I told you about, a little bit about the slaves. We just discussed the slaves coming from the north. Goro is actually not an ethnic, it's not an Ebe word. It's a Hausa word. Hausa, by the way, is the largest ethnic group in all of Africa. Hausa Goro means cola nut. Cola nuts is where Coca-Cola comes from. Originally, your caffeine had real cola nut in it. And it's good stuff. It'll give you the caffeine about... So one of these cola nuts can be as much as 12 to 24 cups of coffee. right? Which is really big in an area devoid, and not only that, it's very medicinal. It works on shingles, it works on coughs, it works on bringing your T cell count up for people with HIV and AIDS. It's just a miraculous thing. But when you don't have a lot of money and you can't afford to eat, you can always afford some kola nuts. And just like you might not have a lot of money, you can always afford a couple cups of coffee. But they've taken this foreign term of Hausa, because the majority, because the Hausa are the biggest group, they've sort of homogenized all the other northern groups that were enslaved and came from the north, and they use these Hausa terms. So kola nut is the voodoo of Goro voodoo, literally means the voodoo of the kola nut. Ati, I'm sure the same in Fon as tree, ke. The verb stem ke means root, so it's literally tree root voodoo. So two things about voodoo and Goro voodoo in general. Number one, it's about spirit possession and epiphany and getting revelations from the spirit. The Bible has a chapter called Revelations, which says revelations are done. Africans don't believe that. And number two, it's about healing, and it's about healing with plants. It's also a moral order. They have what's called a say. It's really about morality. Jesus will forgive you. Kunde will not. You steal somebody's stuff, you might not get sick, but your daughter will, your mom will, and sometimes they'll die. So all witchcraft is in Ase and all these indigenous terms are explained through this. But Goro Voodoo continues to gain adherence because it's about morality. It's the same reason why there's such respect for Islam among indigenous people compared to Christianity. Because when you go to the market, if you're a true Muslim, you're not supposed to be jacking the price up on people, right? You're supposed to be doing it share. So this isn't to say that churches don't do some good things in Africa or that Christianity is bad. But what I'm saying is there's an adoration, a romance of things that are other, particularly Islamic, particularly Northern, that is a part of not only the ritual complex here, but also the very way in which people construct their identity and their personhood. CV?
So we can get in here to where this religion began. Like I said, this isn't some primordial religion that's 10,000 years old. Goro Voodoo, this specific ritual complex, is actually 20th century. We've got going about in around like the 1920s, 1930s is when it originally started.
That's when they were all put together. These gods, we find things in the academic literature, some of the gods going back to the 17 and 1800s. But the time that they were assembled and became a formal thing was probably around the 1920s as a whole. So the guy who founded this religion, Kojo Kuma, actually built the fetishes that you see in the shrine. In other words, Fotete, the guy you've seen in the yellow shorts that we work with, knew him. So he's literally a second generation.
Yeah, and as the colonialism got going really strong, the great conference, the Berlin Conference of 1894, but really it got going 19-teens, 1920s, when things really got altered. Everything indigenous institution is processed is deep structural alterations. This generated an immense amount of conflict and tension within communities themselves as they sought to understand this defeat, these deep-seated changes that are going on around them, new diseases being brought by colonialism.
Also cocoa wealth.
Syphilis.
The chocolate boomed, and so when the cocoa, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's a really important point. When cocoa production got big and the British started, people, if you read Sidney Benson's Sweetness of Salvation, at first sugar was for rich folks, right? Same thing is true with chocolate. Well, when cocoa wealth came in northern Ghana, a lot of people had money, and then other people didn't. And in a system where there's reciprocity, that invokes jealousy. Jealousy, or player hating, turns into witchcraft, right? So how do you deal with this? Well, the indigenous way of doing it through the African mind was to deal with this in a very African way, by co-opting these foreign gods and bringing in morality. Now, they can punish you if you do bad things, but they can do a lot of good things if you follow them as well.
Yeah, so what they did was, essentially, they read it through the text, the cultural text of, our gods are no longer working. Our spirits are not helping us. Our spirits have failed. Where are spirits that can help us? And they looked north, from the coast into the northern territories. Getting into the northern territories of Ghana and Togo, colonialism didn't penetrate as much. There wasn't as much direct colonial control. The diseases, especially the Spanish influenza of 1919, didn't penetrate as much up there. So they saw these spirits, these gods of the north, as much more powerful.
Wow, people are behaving. There's not, people are acting
There's
more
discipline,
moral.
there's
And the other thing
witchcraft.
is white folks and colonials in general didn't go into the north.
No.
It's called a white man's graveyard for a reason. People died. It's a very tough place for white folks to exist. So all of a sudden they start saying, wow, this northern way of life is the way we Africans used to live before colonialism. We have more morality. We have our indigenous gods. We don't have a vicious gun slave cycle going on here for hundreds of years. So again, it gets romanticized in an interesting way.
Excuse me, what is the north?
The north, that's a great question. The north could be anything from 60 kilometers north all the way up across the Sahara Desert. It's romanticized in a way. But mostly they're talking about Sahelian spirits from the savannah. Northern Ghana, northern Togo, southern Niger, and Mali were a great, and the slaves followed those same age-old slave routes, you know, down. And they'll even say things like, you got, talking to us as Americans, you got the slaves we didn't want. We kept the pretty ones.
Yeah.
We kept the big, strong ones. And they'll tell you about rituals, putting dead bodies into the sea, and then when they get covered with cowrie shells, come and eat them, and then they bring the body up and they take these cowrie shells. And literally, slaves were traded for a bag of cowrie shells. Right. That's why this subtext of our book is of spirit, slave, and sea, not just the ethnography.
It's a good question with the north, because if you look at it environmentally, you have the coastal belt, the forest belt, and then the northern savanna. Boom, boom, boom. The forest belt was the land in the 1700s of the empires. You had the Dahomeans in contemporary Benin, you had the Ashanti in contemporary Ghana, and these empires of the forest would raid north into the savanna against the decentralized, you know, very spread out, village-oriented ethnic groups of the Moshi, the Chamba, and other people.
And before that, you had great empires
in
the north.
south.
Before that, you know, you had, of course, you had Timbuktu, you had Mali, you had
Yeah,
Songhai, and the original Ghana, which was to the north. So there's always been this exchange. This globalization is just a neoliberal newspeak. It's a new word. Caravans. I mean, Mansa Musa in 1200 brought so much damn gold to Mecca that he valued it by 1,000% in Israel. Mm-hmm. I mean, you want to talk about Henry Ford, you know. So this isn't, it isn't like people weren't moving and there wasn't trade and exchange going on before that. We want to talk a little bit about the difference.
Sure. Before we dive into what we're going to get is the gods and the rituals that surround them, and then wrap it up quickly. But before we get into that, you really have to kind of free your mind, like I said, of this Western imagination of religion to truly understand the African religious imagination. So we set this up just to give you kind of a black and white. Of course, everything's more complicated than this, but to give you a black and white of how to do it. Western, you know, it's segregative. I'm a Muslim, you're a Jew, you're a Christian. How do I know that? Because you act and pray like a Muslim, you act and pray like a Jew, you dress like a Jew, I dress like a Christian, etc. Here it's integrative. I will go to mosque on Friday, I will go to the Vodu shrine on Saturday, and I will go to Mass on Sunday. And there's nothing wrong with that. I will go where I have relationships with the different spirits. If they're Muslim spirits, if they're Christian spirits, doesn't matter. Western, meditative. Strongly based on dogma, on text, on creed. African, ritualistic. It's made by doing. That way, it's often said that Western is more deocentric, it's God-centric. Africana is more human-centric.
And these are just, this is not all-inclusive. This is a way...
No, it's just a way of trying to help you understand. Western exclusionary, assimilative, based on reason, based on motion. Western dualistic, West African multiplicity. I was teaching this the other day to my undergraduate students, and I showed them a scene from one of those Dan Brown books with Tom Hanks. And he's talking to the Pope, and the Pope asks him, like, are you a Christian man? And he says, faith is a gift I have yet to receive. That makes perfect sense from a Christian perspective. Mm-hmm. Because think about it, it's a gift you're getting, you're passive, God is the agent who is bringing you this gift. If you wanted to translate that sentence into Goro Vodu, it'd be, relationships with the spirits is something I have yet to actually do. Mm-hmm. Now who's centric? The human being is going to the spirit. See the difference there? Yeah. And it's a good way just to understand the difference between how Western, how we see spirits, God, etc., and West African, how they see spirits, gods, etc., and our relationship to these beings. That makes sense.
And of course, it was Leopold Senghor who said Greek is reason and black is emotion. Papa Kunde, this is the first god. Kunde's origins, Kunde eats dog. That means Kunde has sacrificed dogs. Very difficult thing for Christian and I as dog owners and dog lovers to adhere to. Papa Kunde is a trinity. You can see three different fetishes. These fetishes here, what we're calling fetishes, which is a problematic word, we'll call them God objects, just so I don't get blasted and have to argue. They use the word fetiche. Of course, it comes from the Portuguese originally. You see three different ones here. There's probably, I don't know how many we counted, 120 different plant and animal parts, at least, that go into just one of these fetishes. So if you don't know how to do it, you don't know the apothecary, it doesn't work. They also have to be imbibed with power. Goro Vodu, unlike Voodoo, Voodoo tends to come through kinship. Goro Vodu you can purchase. I've purchased these god objects, many Europeans. These god objects are sitting in Italy, they're sitting in Japan. He's done a lot of work with a lot of Europeans as a whole. But Papa Kunde is the first. And he's like a strict Muslim father. He only wears red. You can see the person in trance here is wearing red. And when this person goes into trance, she's called a Kunde Si, meaning a wife of the spirit. And everyone's always a little fearful when someone goes into trance because they see all. And if you've been the priest and you have a wife and you've been sleeping with the lady next door, when they go into trance, they're going to find that out. Mm-hmm. And when they go into trance, they're not an adept, they're not a trance anymore, just a wife of the spirit. They actually are the god themselves, which means they have more power than even the Master Bokono voodoo priest that we talked about. So in front of you, you have a table, you can keep it with you. It's some of the gods, some of the colors, some of the prayers. I do have a longer one that attaches to specific medicines and with clinical trials what the medicines have been used for. If you're into more of the scientific side, just send me or Christian an email. And Christian, you want to talk about Nana Ablewa?
Oh, Nana Ablewa. Where Kunde is the father, the king, Mama Ablewa is the mother, the queen. Their fetishes rest together in the only enclosed shrines, and they are connected, representing that strong connection between husband and wife. They being a patrilineal society, Ablewa rests with not her mother, but her mother-in-law, reflective of that patrilineal. And her mother-in-law is actually Allah.
Allah.
Yeah, I wonder where that came from. This is not based on Islam per se. This is based on the people's views and past engagements with Muslims. Think of it that way. Not Islam, but Muslims. Where do they encounter Muslims? The market. The market is a social space for women. These Muslim women market people are very, very powerful market sellers. Therefore, they must have very, very powerful spirits. Allah. See where that connection kind of goes? So Allah is a female market spirit in Goro Vodu. Kunde's mother, her color is white, and this is extremely important, the color, and only white animals are sacrificed to her, white sheep, white chickens, and white goats.
And interestingly, about the Allah thing, all throughout Africa, East Africa included, but even along the coast, you have what are called zongos. And zongo in Arabic is a place where Muslims come to sell their goods. And just like stereotypically here in Detroit, when we look at Chaldeans who are not Muslims, but they own grocery stores. They're in business, right? The same thing is true with Muslims in Africa. So the ritual spiritual goods that they're selling in the north, including the red fez and Muslim elements, have been co-opted by local indigenous voodoo people. That doesn't mean that's all they're selling. They also sell other goods as a whole. But as a whole, when you need these different goods, these different medicines, these different sacrifices, you go to a place called Zango. There's one in Cotonou, there's one in Lomé, there's one in Accra and elsewhere. Sunya Campo is the firstborn daughter. And she's the equivalent to Papa Legba, with this big penis so large that he throws it over his shoulder, right? The big phallic penis, everyone knows about Legba. Legba, the trickster god. Legba was the seventh born in Yeve Voodoo. And if you come from a large family, you know that those last born ones, because they have so many brothers and sisters, tend to be smart. They get away with more. They pick up on so many things from their brothers and sisters. They tend to be a little spoiled. Well, she's the equivalent of Legba, and she's also spoiled. She's also very difficult to work with. She's the god of stone, but she's also a trickster. And you can see the beautiful pastel colors that the people wear when they go into trance with her as a whole. You want to do your, should we do Bangare first?
Oh, Sacrabode and Bangare together. Sacrabode, go back, Sacrabode. Sacrabode is the son, the steed. Bangare is the slave hunter. Sacrabode is his steed. God of earth, he's viewed as sort of the slave, but Bangare is the slave hunter. His color is black and red, and it's usually goats that are sacrificed to him. He is actually two different gods at once. You can see Sakra, the body, and Bodhi, the horns, right here. Go up to Bangade.
Yeah, and interestingly, Sacrabode was originally a singular god named Sacrabundi, but Sakra sounds a lot like Sakpata, and Sakpata, who's an earth god in Voodoo, this is also a earth god. And then you would have Ogun, which is the iron and warrior god, and his replacement in Goro Voodoo of sorts would be this guy, Lord Bangade.
Bangade is an interesting one. We focused a lot on Bangade in our research because he came up a lot. As you can see, there are a lot of fetishes sitting there.
Yeah.
What that is he is a pantheon in his own right. He was the warrior, the hunter, the slave raider, always the image of a bearded Muslim. He has since become, as Togo has increasingly become a police state, he has become the policeman, the secret policeman. If you're in trouble and you know you are, you go to Bangade before the secret police
military
come
people come to get talismans. People in the military, which is a very oppressive regime, also do this. You see these bells here that are a part of the Bangare God Object Fetish? This was written about Jack Goody. Jack Goody, Bangare comes from Ivory Coast, from Cote d'Ivoire. Not necessarily, a little bit from the north, but more from the east. There was a black and a white Bangare and Jack Goodies. The white Bangare was the myth, the black Bangare was the ritual, but the bells were there to alert you when somebody has broken the law. So you see, Bangare doesn't look anything like that in Ivory Coast today, but it's moved and it's changed. And you see Bangare all the way to Cameroon, all the way to Congo. This stuff grows because it's so tied to medicine, and in a world devoid of Western medicine, it heals. and also because it's so big about morality. A lot of people believe that urbanity and that world capitalism as it is in and of itself bringing negativity and changing the African lifestyle. But like Christian says, all of these gods are different. Chenge, god of 7 knives. This one is called Moshi. Moshi is an ethnic group. Look how black and circular it is. And then you can see the kola nuts, the goro that are being offered. You can see cowrie shells embedded into it as a whole. Bangare is on the rise. There's gangs in Lome and gangs in Accra called Bangare boys who are not voodoo people, but they look at Bangare as being a badass, just like we look at a gangster film or something like that. So you're going to see Bangare, and we chose to spell it phonetically the way they did it. It's spelled 7, 8, 10 different ways. You'll see Bangare written about for the next 50 years, I would imagine, immensely.
Yeah, so we sought to understand like how many fetishes are actually part of Bangare and how he is his own pantheon. And this is an extended quote, but finally a Sofo priest sat us down and really expanded this out. Where he's a hunter, and so all the other fetishes are his accessories. You have the gun, you have the sack, the blade, and he can call on all of his tools to do what needs to be done. So when you go to Bangade, what makes him so powerful is you're not going to one spirit. You're going to a virtual small army of them, headed by a general. That's not their words, I'm saying that. Headed by a general. You go to him and he says, take your children, your sons, go do this, go do that. Where he works for them, Magazun, the god of the 7 knives, Senge. And all these different spirits. And he's become immensely, immensely powerful within probably the last 20 years.
Probably a former slave. All of these Goro Vodus, by the way, could very well be slave spirits. I personally think that's the case. I don't want to put that argument forward. Other people have proposed it, but all of these could be slave spirits. Bangare, like Ogun and Yebe Voodoo and the Big Voodoo, died a violent death, like I talked about earlier, Vumeku. So when you have ceremonies, you take his stuff out of the shrine, his fetishes, and they go to the sacred forest. Kunde died a house death. He stays there. Only Bangare, because he died a violent death. When you die a violent death, it can come back again and again and again. And on the one hand, they're in awe of his powers, and on the other hand, there's a deep amount of fear, because no one wants to see that change. The last god here, because we're at a time limit, I want to allow some time for, I want to show at least a video clip and allow some questions, but is Nanawango. She's here on the right. She's the only anthropomorphic god in Goro Voodoo that's shaped like a human being. She is grandmother crocodile. Crocodiles can go in the water. They can also have their children on land and go beneath the earth. They will spit the sodavi and the jinn on her sometimes. They will give her eggs. She eats chickens just like others would. The guy on the left is a Bokono Sofo priest who actually used to be a Nana Wango Si, which is a wife to the crocodile spirit. He fell into trance during our ceremony in 2013. So let's look at a little bit of
So how exactly do you engage these gods? You engage them through a couple of different means. Obviously the first one is prayer. What BC's doing here is he's using the rock to call Kunde. Kunde, he's mediating between the guy, you'll see the guy in the red fez hat, who's actually the one doing the prayer. And BC's mediating between him and Kunde the spirit.
And notice he's using his left hand. All the other gods he will knock with his right hand and give 4 kola nuts to. Kunde left hand gets 3 kola nuts.
He's the one actually bringing the prayer. So yes, he says, and BC always says this is prayer, you never go to these gods empty-handed. You're going to go and ask them for something. You don't go to your mother and father empty-handed. You never do that. That's how they explained it. You got to bring something. So if the clip goes on there, you can see how he brings like libation, he brings kola nut, he can bring cash to throw into Kunde, to get Kunde.
And you can work it out. I've had times where they've gone there and they're being like, look, we need 3 cows. And I'm like, look, that's $8,000. I got $1,000 in it. So you can barter.
Well, you negotiate.
You can barter and negotiate with the gods themselves. And then, of course, just as important as prayer, called Dogbeda, is possession.
This is a woman going in possession by what this clip is actually is an ancestor slave spirit.
That's a Chamba. That's a whole other slave spirit pantheon, but also from the north.
Linguistically, you'll notice the gods are called the Trowo, which is plural for tro. Tro means to turn.
To turn or to change.
And when they go into trance, they'll start spinning, which is it's a cultural generality in the middle. There I am.
And as you can see, me and Christian stick up.
We don't blend. We don't. Here we go.
We don't always see them, but they always see us.
Oh, yeah. But once this woman is taking over by the spirit, she is the spirit, and she is treated very much like him. They will bring the ritual accoutrement of the spirit, the dress of the spirit, the libation preferred by the spirit. They will wash the woman in ritual gin, which is preferred by the spirit, etc., etc.
And for those of you, some of you I know from looking at your face are familiar with voodoo, but the body is the horse. The spirit is the jockey. So you're just giving up your body for the spirit to ride. Now you don't ever, it's taboo for us to even show our videos to people who have been in trance. That's a very problem. I've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably, you know, not to put a price tag on it, but $5,000 and $7,000 cameras just poop out and never ever work again during spirit possession. A lot of rituals have to be done. Now, because we're with Bokono Sofo, spirits don't want to be, and people can believe whatever, it's not scientific, it's not possible. I think this guy's more on the science side than me, and he'll tell you it's just the way it works. It's very powerful stuff as a whole, especially this, because this is a Mama Chaba, this is a slave spirit. That means somebody in her matriline or patriline enslaved people. Once you figure that out, sometimes you could be in a room like this, and you just go into trance and start acting weird. They take you to the doctor, and they have to take you to have divination. And you need to figure out, who did you enslave? Was it a Moshi? Was it a man? Was it a female? Then you have to build a school with certain colors and a certain amount of legs for everyone that you enslave. So these African folks in this village, all of them who have gone through initiation, myself included, being an American, you know, damn well know my family enslaved people, right? We all have a part in this, folks. Whether we want to admit it. You don't have to be black to be worshiping slave spirits. In fact, I think if you're white, the onus is on you more for reconciliation. But they also can bring messages. And remember, these slaves died violent deaths. They worked hard, and because they died violent deaths, they're dangerous, and you have to appease them. And you see different slave rituals, and we're working, Dr. Montaluz knows, on a third book right now about slave spirit rituals all around the world. They're called Zar and Bori in Iran. They do them in Kerala, India, where the Portuguese were there. They have slave spirits. So this isn't just a minute thing happening in Africa. It happens in Brazil, and your Umbanda rituals. It happens in Cuba. It happens in Haiti. So slave spirits are my new sort of trajectory, and Christians as well.
And once they take on the spirit, and the spirit is here, the point of this is you can engage them, and they can engage you. This isn't based on faith, where you're just hoping God hears your prayer. They are standing in front of you and speaking to you, and you can approach them and do the go back really briefly, and you can see sometimes it can be negotiated. What you're seeing here is this woman is begging Abelewa, the goddess of market woman, to help her husband, who's a fisherman and is not getting a lot of fish.
Yeah.
The guys behind me were laughing and laughing as they translated this to me. And you can see the look on Abelewa's face there, basically saying, your husband is a bum. I can't help you.
And meanwhile,
to work.
You see this guy here, Sakra Bode, he's looking at the drummer saying, play my music, who's also in trance. And then you see Bandare here saying no. So sometimes it just becomes this thing where they're in trance where they want to hear, because all these gods have hundreds and hundreds of rhythms and songs, poems, plants, colors. I mean, if you were to write it all down, it would probably equal I don't know, 100 Bibles. Honestly, it's really dense, and they know all this orally and you know, by way of mouth, which is really amazing. Offerings, we know about sacrifice. We don't have a ton of time, so let's skip to it. But sometimes they call it vosa. They have different names for offerings. Animal sacrifices, abo. Bear in mind, they probably eat about 15% of the meat we do. And until you've gone to a factory farm, or until you've gone to, you know, a slaughterhouse, unless you're vegetarian or vegan, we really don't have much to say here, because the way we treat animals is horrible. They eat a lot less meat than us. They're saying sorry for it. That being said, the sound of a goat sounds like a baby. And to see puppies, sometimes in cats, is very difficult for me as a Westerner. In fact, we've had to buy animals as part of our initiations, and Christian's even worse than me. Christian was paying money to free animals that were tied up at one point on a rope that were going to be sacrificed to get their freedom.
Yeah, one guy yelled at me for it too. Like, no, don't you worry about that.
And we're not, as anthropologists, that's not good, but sometimes your heart gets in the way. So,
and you can see this is just Kofa, the son.
So there's Sunya Campo, those are called pomes or oven. He's pouring gin. Why gin? Because the ancestors want gin. The British brought good gin. And when they ran out of gin, they brought beer. So the gods want the good stuff.
But you offer things to the gods. Build and maintain relationships. How do you do that? Giving the gods gifts. Libations. The gods in turn will turn around and you. And if you want to do this, I don't know how long. So, you don't see anything bad.
No, we edited quite a bit out. Although for what we paid, our cow was very skinny. And the guy who purchased our cow got in trouble for it. Big ceremonies called Feta Trocho, turning of the year ceremonies that happen every 3 or 4 years. They'll sacrifice a cow. And the way it's portioned out depends on who hosted it, gets the hind legs, and certain people get things. But it's really about breaking bread together, companionship, you break bread together.
Because it is a cow, it is a large animal, so you need a whole group of priests who are ritual experts at this.
That's right. They're called bosompo. Only certain people, just like in halal and kosher, are allowed to do the animal killing. And they will tell you to a man, because they're almost always men. It's hard. It's hard to kill animals. And if you've ever met hunters, real hunters, people who really have empathy for the environment, they'll tell you the same thing. It's a very difficult thing to do.
But that is pretty much the end of the cow right there. They do it quick. They have to because you don't want a wounded, bleeding cow.
You see, look at Bangare's out here. Not all the other fetishists, but see all the Bangare? He died a violent death. So he's brought from the shrine to the inner courtyard.
And you offer the blood directly to the spirits.
And when the blood comes, the trance comes, because it's when people eat almost immediately. And I've said things like, well, what about Hinduism? Because my wife's Hindu, and I go to the temple pretty regularly with that. And I said, yeah, well, they lie. Indians have the strongest witchcraft in all of Africa, because they meet a lot of them with money, and they know that they delve into these stereotypes. They know they understand plant medicine, they're vegetarian. And the one case where they're right is Hinduism used to kill animals. For hundreds of years this went on. And it's been a movement. He'll say they need the blood. Why the blood? Because they want the blood. Now that doesn't mean that I couldn't do my own rituals and not kill animals. It just means they probably aren't going to be as effective. Because your granddaddy don't want tofu. He wants a chicken sandwich, okay? And that's been explained.
And it's in the Bible too. You think back in your Genesis, why was God so mad at Cain but loved Abel? Yeah, read that part again.
Well, it's all the blood sacrifices throughout.
Abel was given blood.
Oh, yeah.
Cain was given vegetables.
The Old Testament is full of it.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. And so are old Judaic texts. So is the Quran.
Well, blood is the life force energy. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly how it's saying.
That's
blood
right.
is life.
So
and
Blood is life, and life is blood.
Flowers
And that's a
just
quote.
not going to do it all the time.
No. And people try to say they do human sacrifice, which obviously is not true.
No.
If you look this up on the internet, it's filled with the sacrifice
no.
of babies.
Yes,
no,
correct.
it's not true.
No.
Well, it talks about, and the Bible does too, in bloodletting.
That's right.
So-
Absolutely.
And it's all throughout the Bible.
And that goes on. There's
And
times
they
where
do it
people do give their blood up and put some of their own blood into sacrifices. And of course, when women are menstruating, they're kept up. They're not allowed to go in the shrine.
Right.
And that's a very powerful thing all around the world when we look at pollution and purity and danger, like Mary Douglas. And that's also tied to blood. And that's really, and a lot of feminists have come out to write, this is about controlling women and women's power. And there's a lot of idea of that. Of course, this is a village where you're not even supposed to talk to your mother-in-law, because some African groups are that way. You just don't commit. You're not going to get along. It's going to be bad. So you don't, so just different things. But let's go to a clip, or do you want to do the ritual?
No, this is pretty much just where we're going to wrap up here. We can do other things. Where it's kind of wrapping up at a theoretical point of view of anthropology.
Just talking about how rituals are tied to politics and tied to economics.
And what you can see is what people go to for the gods, the relationships they want, and what they're trying to do with these different gifts can be strongly indicative of social change. Bangade is a perfect example here. He became the policeman within the last 30 years as Togo increasingly became a police state. Once Togo stops, actually what you're also seeing between the rise of Bangade too is the rise of Ablewa, with the coming of neoliberalism, the opening up of markets. The new dictator of Togo, who's the son of the old dictator, is promising to open Togo to free markets. Yay! And all of a sudden, boom, you see Ablewa start to rise in power as people go to Ablewa. So you watch social movement, social change, you can see this through the gift.
So where do we go from here? We talked about the North-South exchange a little bit. The Eyadema, who's the dictator, on his third term, changed the constitution. His father overtook Olympio in 1967 with a coup. He was the longest-serving dictator in Africa. The current one is blaming Southern people for violence, and they call it in the media things like tribal warfare. But the truth is the people in the South are worshiping Northerners to the point where they're actually becoming them in trance. And it's sad that this falls on deaf ears as a whole. Northern people, the Kabye people, what the president is, make up about 20% of the population. The Ewe people are more like 60. So this stuff translates into politics as well. By the way, Eyadema, the new one, who is a darling of the U.S., running out ads in the Washington Post, had all the structural adjustment programs, including Obama, who did things. By the way, all of African, all of our money that's going to Africa is going to Togo because their military is strong. We're actually spending more on security. For all the talk of China and India spending money in Africa, the United States is outspending them by twice, but we're spending it on security and anti-terrorism, and India and China are spending it on things like infrastructure as a whole. So this stuff matters. Even a little place like Togo, they're taking almost all the Africans. So all the troops that get trained for African by the United States start out in Togo, and then they're tied to the UN and get dispersed throughout as a whole. But this becoming the other in trance, this north-south trajectory is really the epitome of it. And I guess we can open it up to questions or comments.
Yeah, we're about,
and we have a ton of video clips if you want them. You guys can just look up our names on YouTube, and there's films. And by the way, both of the movies are here at Wayne State. You can rent them for free if you want to see them. One's 37 minutes, one's 1 minute and 6. The book that is here, don't go buying a $140 book. Wayne State ordered it. You can read it for free. And if you do want a copy of the book, you have a flyer here. You can get a paperback for $25 if you're interested. But I know a lot of you probably have some questions or comments, even though there's not a lot of you here. And thank you for those of you who did come. I didn't over-promote. I thought it was going to be too full. I learned my lesson. Yes?
Good job.
Turn the lights on.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Rowe.
So I've learned quite a bit, not only just working with Eric, but just this discussion. So my question is, are the gods or the spirits chosen, or are they just anointed,
That's
or
interesting.
do they, just are they selected,
It's
or do they
interesting.
say I want to be a god, or
That's a very good question. Everything's based on efficacy. So what you can see happen as part of the analysis at the end is, I'll give you an example. I desperately need to make more money. So I got this little god, I got this spirit, nobody knows about. It's a spirit I know that somehow I came across maybe from my father, and all of a sudden I start getting a lot of money. You notice this. And you say, hey, what spirit you got there? I got this spirit. Can you teach me that? Sure. And actually, now you're making money. Now you're making money. Now we're all venerating the spirit. Now Detroit's venerating the spirit. Now the Eastern Seaboard's venerating the spirit. Now you have a major god.
Yes.
And so if that god ever stops giving money, all of a sudden we stop venerating the god.
On the one hand, it's efficacy, Barb, but you can't pick who you go.
collective.
You can't pick if you go into trance, if you're going to be a wife of the spirit, whether you're a male or female, you're a wife no matter what, and you can't pick who it is. Normally, the way that is determined is kids will start acting a little bit different, and they'll take them to the sacred bush, and they'll put medicines, they'll drip plants right into their eyes, and they'll wait for this kid to come and sing. And based on the song they sing, they'll know what God has chosen them. Sometimes people go to the bush 4, 5, 6 times from as early as 11 or 12 years old, and it just never happens. So you don't get to say, wow, I like Bongary, he's a badass.
No,
When I go into
that's
trance, I'm going to be the one with the pitchfork. And it does. I mean, the strength they get in Bongary, I've seen people, 10, 12, 14 people, trying to control them with a machi, Muslim sacred water and stuff, knocking down things. It's like somebody on LSD or steroids mixed. I mean, and people get really strong. I mean, old people go over walls. People in their 70s and 80s can climb walls when they're in trance. And then sometimes you go into trance and you're just this, but you don't get to pick your spirit. The gods choose you.
Right.
You do, and a lot of times, here's the crazy thing. Priests come, especially Baptists, but not just the Baptists, Pentecostals, come to visit Foe to make magic, to put underneath their floor at their church to get more people to come to their church.
really?
All the time. Muslim
too.
imams
Yeah.
come, and we'll have him make certain things to figure out divination, to figure out who's stealing this stuff. So it isn't like you're either a Christian, you're a voodooist, or you're this or you're that. Fo Tete, the guy you see here, is so well versed in Catholicism, like Montelu's coming from Haiti. A lot, it's different in Haiti, right? Because Haiti, they say, oh, it's 90% Catholic, 100% voodoo. But the truth is that voodoo, even in Haiti, is probably going down, even in Benin. In Togo, it's not. The dictatorship, as horrible as it has also helped preserve voodoo in a weird way. It's coming back in Benin in some ways because it's been recognized as a national thing. But the percentage of quote-unquote animists is higher in Togo than it is anywhere in Africa, interestingly. But you ask a great question, Barb. Yeah, and now you can choose if you want to go to voodoo, be a part of voodoo or whatever, but the gods decide if you're going to be a butcher, are you going to be a wife to the spirit, are you just going to be a caretaker that watches the people when they're in trance, are you going to become a priest? And sometimes women become priests too. But it's a great question. Yes, Jose?
Yeah, a comment and a couple of questions.
Mm.
One is the comment is that you keep saying it's not primal religion, but the key elements of primal
Absolutely.
religion are
That's right.
there.
Voodoo is primordial, and the worship of ancestors, the way rituals, the notion of spirit possession, the tying of that to plants and drums is thousands of years old. Goro voodoo is a newer thing because it happened after colonialism. But the pre-existing voodoo matrix, some people say voodoo starts in the big voodoo, not the Goro voodoo, starts in the 1700s. Others argue that it's 2,000 years before Christ. And the beautiful thing is we're starting to get archaeology out of West Africa like never before. And it's starting to look at things. And two things I would predict are going to happen. Number one, you're going to see the sacred feminine in Africa is bigger than anyone thought. That maybe Judaism, Islam, and Christianity were about controlling women. Because these black, powerful women scared people. And there's a lot of
theories out there.
And there's not just theories. There's starting to be a lot of archaeological evidence to back that up. That's
Well,
number one.
Yeah, there's a conclusion that all the great religions really came out of the primordial
That's right.
religion.
That's right.
Yeah.
But you answered one question that I had was, is there ancestor worship? And there is.
Yes.
And then the other one is, can the concept of the axis mundi be applied to this? That is the portal to the other side, that's the center of the universe.
Of course. Absolutely. Now, the Potomitan in Haiti, which is the central peristyle, you don't have that in Africa, But you do have this idea of breaking through to the other world, and there's ways to do that with plants, and there's ways to do that with ritual. And they'll say that, you know, dule mako afofan fia, which is he or she's gone to the other side of the street. And the other side of the street is a metaphor for that. You don't have the potomitan, and Dr. Montelis can probably answer this better than me, at every voodoo covenant. Although you just see it in Benin sometimes, no? Or
No, it is not. They don't have.
not like Haiti.
Not with connected with the Shua.
Yeah. And in Haiti, in Dambala Wedo, right, the serpent rainbow, think about it, snakes can go underneath the ground, they can float in the water, they can also climb trees, so there's a sacredness to snakes as a whole. However, I will tell you that there is this axis mundi based on these pomes, or these different, and especially, and we didn't get into this because we didn't have any time, but when you do Ifa divination, that turns into sacred geomancy. And what they call columns in Indian Hindu, and you know what they call vevs in Haiti, these different designs in geometric paintings, you do see that in Africa, and those are necessary for transporting to the other world and for figuring out your life, you know. And of the 256 combinations that are a part of Ifa, I've had mine done 4 times, and they got the same one 3 times in 4 different countries. And the one guy who didn't get the same one was drunk, and I just, you know, sometimes you go to people and you just get a weird vibe, or you know what I'm saying? Now, each one of those 256 chapters of Ifa is probably, if you were to write it down, again, hundreds and hundreds of Bibles. And
Right.
people know this by heart, and that's everywhere. That's Brazil and things like that. And for Ifa divination, once you become an Afavi or an Ifavi, a child of Ifa, after then you go to have consultations done. Some of those consultations involve breaking through to the other world with sacred geomancy. So there's a little bit of an overlap.
Because just going through the trance, getting to a trance means that you're in the other world.
That's right. That's right. And sometimes trance is put on. Sometimes people smoke weed and drink, and it's very taboo. You're not supposed to be doing it. And there are people who fake trance sometimes.
Right.
But people
Oh, yeah.
know.
Right.
People know. Just like you know when someone's fronting a church, you know when someone's fronting in this too. And that's the final thing I want to say. And I think Montelus would say that a final comment here. Voodoo is more similar to the black church than the white church is to the black church today, in my opinion, going there. You see these elements of African spirituality. So spirituality supersedes these labels that we put on things as a whole. And one of my things is in my life is to not just introduce where I come from in Flint and to black folks to this and Christians and let them know that this is your stuff, this is sacred stuff, this is important. But also to other people, including even I have talks with Hindus and they don't have a problem with this. But I have talks with priests and they do a lot of times. And I think that it's unnecessary. There's a lot of spiritual things that supersede religion. And most of what we see in the black church is very close to Africa.
I'm sorry. What you said, it is so true. Our course, which is I introduced years ago, 25 was African religion. Remember, my second book was it was spirituality, spirituality of African people.
He just read
So you just read. So I just changed the title, and I hope it will be approved effectively. African religion and spirituality. And you said that the spirituality is broader than the African religion.
And so is the religious imagination. Yes.
That means, Lord,
Yeah.
before I leave, because I have class this afternoon, I would like to, first of all, to congratulate you for this beautiful work you have
Oh,
done.
merci beaucoup.
With the little thing you have received from us in anthropology department, the little push. But there are 2 things I really clap hands for that. Number 1, you have, I don't know if you have read to Marcel Mauss, but I know
The gift.
you have that in anthropology, 2 add on 2. Everything is in everything. So there is an intertwining of factors in religion, politics, social, family, and so on. And you show that very, very well. Second, it is most of the people, I should not generalize, I don't want to blame anyone, because everyone does what they can do the best in this forest. You have gone beyond that to find the relation with the neighbors. And I would suggest it, since you are in Togo, and you are next to Ghana, next door to Ghana, and I know you have gone to Ghana. You have part of Ghana, Western Ghana, it is Dieve, but just the other door, you have the Adjunct.
That's right. Akan, yes.
And it would be nice, maybe if you don't research there, to look into it, because the Adjunct has a very strong impact on Vodu
That's
religion.
right. You're right, and these gods, many of them were Ashanti gods.
Yep.
Because the Akan gods from the north, even though we say northern Ghana, they controlled that area.
Yes.
So this is a way to co-opt power, you're right. And if we really had the money and funding, we would like to go north and trace where all of these
You
gods
will
come
have-
from, to the apparent tribe.
Continue, you will have that.
Maybe
Let
Voodoo
me
Pantheon
say
was first
about
killed.
the north, since my colleague Jose has asked the question, was very interesting. Well, you show that, and it is true. The Hausa, which is Niger, northern Togo, because you know the colonizer caught whatever and leave Hausa that side
Yes.
and the other side.
Yes.
But I went to the north myself. I Benin, and next door to Togo, and the Hausa, and they have great influence upon those along the coast. Curiously, the Hausa, in this sense, you have many of them, most of them, they are also Muslim, but they have impact. Let me tell you my little experience, which is not big. You know, you have long life ahead of you. I was taking the little, it is not taxi, they call that taxi.
The little rickshaw like this.
No, it was, I was in Lomé where I slept there and doing also research. And then I had to go to Benin, 100, 150 kilometers, and Cotonou. And I was sitting down there, and I heard someone saying, Kita, Kita, Kita. I am here before the language, so I cannot lie. He said, Kita, Kita. I said, I woke up, and I said, what do you mean by Kita? He said, assieds-toi. That means sit down. Professor, you know in Haiti what we said for assieds-toi? Shita. Oh, coming from the Hausa north.
That's amazing. And there's so much with...
And if you ask the Haitian, they would say, we have nothing from the Hausa.
Alada, Rada, right? Rada,
No.
it's all Pombe, but it's not.
Coming from there, and this morning, I felt good,
Oh, yes.
knowing where this word come from.
A lot of chronology.
And so continue that way.
Thank
It is
you.
great.
And you're right, the Hausa, and not only Congo, but Brazil, Cuba, everything for voodoo gets tied to Benin, gets tied to Togo.
Yes.
Right.
But those gods in Togo and Benin are often northern, even before that, and foreign. Mami Wata is foreign, the water, Chaba is foreign. And then we go to the New World, and everyone writes as it's either Congo or it's Benin.
Right.
And the truth is, the Hausa, because whoever wins, right? Because you were enslaved, you lose your
Yes.
history. Even though the Hausa are a huge group.
Here is my last point. Allow me. The word schwein you use, how you say that, because you speak it, right? How you say schwein?
They have a lot of words. They say atike fome, which means medicine house. Atike fomo, fomo. A lot of times they'll say tombeau in French because you know they're speaking French. And then they have also vasek pli, which translates as realm of spirits or house of spirits. But there's probably 20 different words. But with me being there, they will just say tombeau because they know my Avia is not strong, so they're speaking to me in French. But oftentimes, atike fome. Fo means house, right? Fome.
Work on that because
Yeah, I should, you're right.
the Adjunct from next door, the Adjunct next door, the Mina and so on, they have the Vodu, they said Vodu ho.
Ah, Vodu.
Yeah,
Okay.
Ho, well, the Westerner would translate that by hot. I remember a Neo-American, okay, wife, I was talking about Brazil and I used the word, the French word, saying why this little hot translated, and he said to me, no, Guerin, he's specialist in the Caribbean. Guerin, it is house. You have to use the word house. Vodu ho, it is the house of the Vodu.
Sure.
You understand?
Yes.
Or you can say also hu ho. You
Yes.
understand?
Huhon I've seen too. Entro fome.
Bon, you would not be surprised in Haiti, you know what called collective memory in linguistics. You know what we call the Vodu
The whole four.
house?
Humfo.
Rumfort.
Humfo.
The ho, because
Yes.
all the slaves did not have this talent of the Adja. The Adja had the GB and the X with a ho,
Yes.
and you have to
Mm.
and they did not have this courage, so it is much easy to say like the French, for, for.
That's interesting.
And that's why I don't use myself the word swine.
Mm.
No. And for Alfred Metro does not rule that.
No, I know.
And he said for.
That's right.
And so on.
But we
Okay,
thought shrine
thank
would be a
you.
bigger
Thank
appeal,
you.
but good point. Thank you all, by the way. for that. Yeah, any other questions? Christian and I are here, so we can talk.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
just Before I scoot out of here, are there any, do you ever take folk to Benin? I've wanted to go to Benin for so many years. I'm a priest of Lukumi.
Ah, yes.
Right, and so very interested. This is, so I'm familiar with this
Even if I
conversation.
didn't go and do a trip, I could hook you up. And he used to do trips too, Montalus. Yeah, send me an email with a card, because even if I don't go, University of Michigan goes every year. I have contacts with people who go. They spend more time in Ghana, but you can still go. And the only thing is be the French in Togo and Benin. It would be hard, but I mean, you can
Benin's a
send.
nice place.
We have a
Very
place in the
nice.
village where you can
Yeah.
stay, and everything like
Very
absolutely.
nice.
And a place I own some property in Ghana that was gifted to me too.
Really?
Yes, I mean, so, but Africa, you're a black woman, man. You're not gonna have a hard time staying anywhere. You're just gonna have to beat them up trying to marry is what you're gonna have to worry about. But yes, and I would keep it open. And because I'm not tenure track professor, going abroad and stuff like that, I did do a medical anthropology trip in 2011 with students, honor students, and so.
So in your book, you list some of the medicinal herbs called.
Yes.
We have a publication. too,
Yeah,
where
if
we
you
create
look up
whole
Materia
chapters.
Medica Voodoo, it's where do we publish that in? The Applied Anthropologist?
Applied Anthropologist.
If you look up the Applied Anthropologist 2015, we published it. We changed some of the names because we have to protect them, but you still get the gist of what's there. We didn't use all the plants that were mixed. Some of the we even put some clinical trials where they've tested. Now, when they do clinical trials, they test these plants in isolation. There's no prayer, there's no context. They don't take how they're mixed with others, so they don't know. But a lot of the things they're using them from have been clinically proven. Things that to stop nosebleeds, things that are good for hypertension and things like that. So, and the real interesting thing is the same plants that are in Africa are, of course, in South America.
Right.
Right? So your Guyanese and your Brazilians have also carried on this, but something needs to be done. Two things, in my opinion. Native Americans, all the way up into the 70s, all this stuff is medicinal. Even these trees here,
Right.
especially the roots. We've lost it for all the except for marijuana, which has pushed everything forward. We really lost botany in the
That
last.
is very-
We
that is
really
very
have.
true.
Native Americans, even in the 1970s, would have told you this is good for cough, and if you use
That's
this
right.
part. So the good news is we're moving
Yeah.
toward that, but unfortunately, black folks, at least to my knowledge, aren't being included the way they should.
No.
But I do know this, there's medicinal farms in Africa where I have contacts, there's ones in Brazil, and they are Afrocentric, they are pro-black
Really?
to no end, and you're gonna see it change. Oh yeah, they're tired of being exploited, and I get it. And I could also hook you up with some of them.
So your email is?
Yeah, just look up Eric Montgomery at wayne.edu, eric.montgomery@wayne.edu.
But it's included in this packet that you just left on.
Yes, and I can also give you a card if you want to, and my office is right here too.
Oh, yes, I
Thank
love
you.
that.
Terry, did you have a question?
I'll talk to you after.
All right.
It was just a question you made about saying that the black churches were much similar. I'm coming at this from a psychology, I'm a sociologist actually, but I'm coming at this from a psychology perspective as well. People, there's the emotional, the psychological, and the intellectual. From the Western perspective, first of all, evangelicals are very much going into much of this with speaking in tongues, and that's part of the psychological need. If you're not in control, you want to find a way to control. And one of the ways to control is internally through what you define as religion and what we call religion, which is one of the patterns that you have in order to create a control on what's going on around you. It doesn't always work as such. And so you can see that the more there is, in a sense, when you talk about slavery or the chaos, in a sense, then you get the much stronger feeling for looking for ways to feeling this and looking outside your immediate environment,
Right.
outside your cultural environment, to what's the past, etc. And the other kind of insight.
You gave me an idea for an article, Harriet. That's brilliant.
Okay, the other kind of thing I got into is the question that we're looking at these days today, which has to do with guilt and responsibility.
Yes.
And the question of the reparations that you're talking about. In this, it requires you to do individual reparations.
That's right.
In our society today, we're beginning to talk about,
Collective.
you want to say, cultural and societal reparations, because we don't accept, and I don't accept, to be honest, individual guilt
Yeah.
for what someone else behind you do, but there is a responsibility if you
Absolutely.
don't look at why it was done, how it was done.
Great
where it
point.
was.
And in this sense,
So
I didn't
those
mean to
two
say it's
kinds
all
of-
There's no
individual. It's collective
disconnection, and that's
too.
the whole point.
Hmm?
The
right.
point is, there's no disconnection.
No.
That's
In
right.
some, for some people, there's no disconnection,
from
and there's an
here,
attempt to
from-
make
from the
there's a
unseen to the
psychological
seen.
need to
There's no
connect.
disconnection.
That's right.
Yeah, that there's a psychological.
And of course,
need.
white
Oh,
privilege
yeah.
gets in the way, and people get, and that ain't me, that ain't my ancestors, but in
Yeah.
Africa, who you are overlaps with your ancestors in a very real way.
Yeah. So does
Absolutely.
black, in this sense,
Yes.
so does black
Absolutely,
privilege.
yeah.
Yes,
Interfere.
absolutely,
Oh,
absolutely.
this is
That's not even
fascinating. I
just-
wish I could say it. Whew.
Bless you
I
all.
love it.
Thank you all. I wish there was more, but we loved it. Thank you. Thank you for the beautiful introduction.
Thank you.